If your business closes or your house falls to the ground, what's left? You've got your family, you've got your education, and you've got your health. So if you're not prioritizing those three things in life, the other stuff doesn't matter. You can win or lose the other stuff more easily than you think, but you really need to prioritize your health, your education you've always got, and family and friends. Because if you can get those things right, then successes and failures in those other areas won't hit as hard.
Our featured speaker today is an experienced management coordinator, business coach, visual artist, and mother. Currently finishing her master's in criminology, she's also working with New York Times bestseller Sarah Wilson, researching themes around systems collapse and future states. Bec, it's a great pleasure to have you as our featured guest today. Thanks so much for taking this time to share your journey with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel honored to be invited on. And wow, that sounds like I'm doing a lot, which I guess I am always. But it's quite a nice mix of art and science and life. So I still feel very balanced at the moment.
That's that entrepreneurial mindset, right? You can't just settle into one. Would you start us off and talk a little bit about some of your experience growing up and the parts you feel like are really relevant to kind of shaping who you became personally and maybe professionally as well?
Well, I guess one thing that stands out compared to a lot of people I know is that, like you, Nancy, I have six younger siblings. And yeah, being the eldest of that many siblings is a wild ride. And probably the reason I only have one child. You do learn adulting a lot quicker. And then when you grow up and leave, you get to be a kid again and see the world through a different set of eyes. I guess from a business point of view, I always had a ready set of customers growing up. So I would try and set up shop from my bedroom window and sell them things that I didn't want anymore. So that was my initial hustle. And gosh, I would have been like 7 or 8. Oh, I loved it so much, but I would get so upset when they wouldn't buy the junk. Like there was a lot of junk left at the end. But yeah, growing up it is a little bit of chaos like that. I guess you're looking for excitement, but you're looking for stability. So I guess that makes me constantly torn between an entrepreneur's mindset and just wanting everything to be safe and stable. Yeah, if it's too stable, I get bored. And if it's too exciting, I scream for stability again. So yeah, it's just paradoxical life of swinging wildly between the branches.
Before we dive in any further, I've got something to share. We're hosting an in-person event on the 8th of May right here in London, and you're invited. It's going to be a great chance to meet, connect, and go deeper into everything we talk about here on the show. You can find all the details and grab your ticket through the link in the show notes. And as a thank you for being a listener, you can get 50% off your ticket with the code VOYAGE50. Would love to see you there.
I love that story of like you trying to sell to your younger siblings. My sister, older sister, she would do the same thing to me where she'd like try and convince me to trade either chocolate for chocolate she didn't like at Christmas or things she wanted of mine for junk of hers. She was very entrepreneurial from a very young age.
Negotiation, isn't it? Negotiation is super important for the rest of your life. So,
It's such a powerful skill. Now, you've done quite a few different things. You've sort of been, as you've jumped, as you said, from branch to branch, you've tried a lot of things. Do you mind giving us a quick sort of run through of those just so everyone has a good understanding?
yeah, I would say that I've led two very parallel lives, often at the same time. And one has been one of very wild creativity. My first job was in a paint shop, and I loved that because I got to play with color and customer experience and all these, fun things when you're 15. That was just I felt very privileged to be in that role for my first job. And then I went on and studied. My first university experience was actually in communications, doing photo media, but it was the kind of photo media where we had to develop our own film. So after losing 3 months of photos, I definitely got a bit of a shot to the heart for that kind of creative industry. That was not a fun experience. Whereas digital now, gosh, it's a bit more of a safety net. I wonder if I would have stuck with it. So I left uni after a year and went and worked full time. And it was just felt so good to be making money and living out of home and just that freedom of getting to do what I want. So education took a major back seat for a long time, probably until I started really getting sick of the corporate world going, oh, is this for me? What am I doing? Do I need to go back to something creative? So I went back and did fashion design, which was super fun again. I had such a good time, but I loved the color and creativity in design. But I really disliked the actual making. So the technical side of it. Yeah, a couple of years into that one, I left that course and just started working volunteer as a stylist for a couple of years. So that was probably, was that my first business? Maybe after selling out of my window, that was probably my first official business. So, yeah, I kind of worked full time, worked as a stylist on weekends and at nights. And then I moved to Melbourne. I forgot about that. I moved to Melbourne, and all of a sudden, I moved to the most creative fashion city in Australia. And I got a great full time job with a big, giant corporate company as a management coordinator because I had been in my full time work moving up as a personal assistant, executive assistant, management coordinator, which is sort of like a project manager and exec. I suddenly had 7 years where I didn't pick up a fashion magazine, a paintbrush, anything. My creative life just died. But what was great is that I had my first experience working with world class managers and working with managers that were unbelievably good. So the company that I worked for was a brewing company. It was the largest in Australia at the time. When I got the newspaper on my first day of work, it said last drinks at Foster's because we had just been taken over by an international company for the first time in 100 years. So I wasn't sure if I was going to have a job anymore. So that was a very exciting first week. The good news was that I got to keep my job. I stayed there for another 3 years as we became South African breweries, basically. So, yeah, going through a global merger and having to change your ways of working and your cultural people management and stuff like that was such an amazing apprenticeship. And I think South African breweries was unbelievable because they were very much work hard, play hard. So we got to work our butts off, but also have a big drink at the end of the week, which was really handy. And it was during that time that I came to MIT boot camps in Boston and met you lovely folk, which we can talk about that separately. But yeah, when I came back, I stayed with the company. So they became, as the conglomerate of lots of different companies around the world, we became the second largest globally, and then number one bought number two. So this is, I think it was $168 billion in Australian money, something absolutely ridiculous. So one and two merged. Obviously, there was a lot of legal stuff that had to happen in pretty much every country around the world for that to get over the line. But it just meant that I really got to see, yeah, what great management was, what great management wasn't, what change management, good change management looked like, what different values and working cultures different countries had. So AB InBev, which is who brought us over, is Belgian Brazilian, but it was very much an American style of management. So that was work you to the bone, don't have a drink afterwards. And then when you quit, we'll just bring in some new graduates. So that was a good time for me to leave. So I went out on my own as a management consultant for a couple of years after that, which was just really fun. Again, I just got to work with more local businesses, and I started learning how to, yeah, get my coaching credentials, because so many of small business owners also have a really entwined personal life. So I was like, what am I doing? I don't know anything about, like, hey, business is tough, but also your marriage is breaking down. I was like, oh, this is kind of out of my depth. So I thought maybe coaching credentials would help that. The coaching course was tough and I loved it. And then as I graduated, I found out I was having a surprise baby. And so that has been amazing. It's been a full left turn, and during pregnancy, I had huge anxiety, and that led me to start my criminology master's. So everything has been so, I feel like my experience is so broad, but, things like marketing and criminology are not that separate as you would think. It's all about changing behavior at the end of the day. You want to know what the user journey is, either from something to crime or from something to purchase. It's really understanding people and their behaviors and, the best points of interception, I guess. So, yeah, things have slowly come back around. And yeah, just to throw a final spanner in the mix, I got an art studio just for a bit of mental health piece. And yeah, I've been painting for the first time in my life. I'm not a painter, I doodle at best. So yeah, these are all my juggling balls at the moment. But that's pretty much the broad journey of how I got here.
I love, though, that you say visual artist, and clearly, like the way you talk about your journey, and you can see the left side and the right side of the brain, and how you have kind of balanced that in your different roles. I think it makes a lot of sense doing that alongside your master's in criminology, because I would anticipate that that takes a lot of the analytical side of your brain. While you were talking, I was thinking back to a question I've been wanting to ask you. Like, one of the things that you and I kind of bonded over at boot camp was agreeing that emotional intelligence was just as important and maybe perhaps less appreciated than other forms of intelligence. And I'm wondering, could you tell us, why and how maybe you became such a passionate advocate of emotional intelligence, and like why that's personal and important to you?
And yeah, that's a good question. I think growing up in maybe a lower socio home, there wasn't always a whole lot of emotional intelligence. I guess we had different tools back then. And, when you know better, you do better. But at the time, it just wasn't really part of our family life or our school life. My parents weren't academically educated at that point. So, something I really got interested in when I moved out of home was self development. And I think that self development has so many layers. And so, at a very basic layer, you can kind of get caught in the guru realm of like gym and tech bros and, eating clean and paleo and all that. And that's totally was my first layer. And I'm sure that served me well at the time. But then, I started getting deeper into positive psychology and really felt strong social, emotional, intellectual impacts from that. So I did an edX course on positive psychology, where that would have been UCLA, and I absolutely loved it. I just thought it was so powerful, and so many people, like everyone should do that course. Everyone can benefit. Our brains are so wired to be anxious and take the 12 negative bites. But how are we reminding ourselves that, there is goodness in us and there is goodness out there?
There's so many scenarios where I think even in a very professional business context, a bit of empathy or a bit of like mutual understanding can take you so far. And I don't think that's often appreciated. So I really appreciate you, digging into that with us. Now, I think another thing that's often underappreciated is the draw to creativity. There's, as you said, you living this dual life of the creative side and sort of the professional side. I think a lot of people don't appreciate how much benefit they can get from taking a creative approach to some things or having a creative outlet. How do you think that has sort of guided you decision wise as you've gone through your journey?
I think that the crossover into business and entrepreneurship is design. And design doesn't necessarily have to be branding or, product development, but user experience. If you're not creative, you're mapping out a customer experience or a route to market. I can't comprehend how you would do that completely. I mean, technically, you could get about 80% done, but so can everyone else. So by having that creative layer, you're putting on or you're taking out that 20% that your competitor is missing. So for me, it's something that I think every single facet, maybe bar finance, should be creative. If you're doing creative finance, you might need to go see the tax man. But yeah, for me, it's definitely been in that marketing and yeah, strategic sessions as well. How can we think about this differently? What are the different hats we can put on? And that's important in management and leadership as well, because, often you're working with a team that is very diverse, very different from each other, different from teams you've worked with in the past. And that creativity can help you. Leaders, you need to be stable, but you need to be a bit of a chameleon to adapt to your situations.
That's a great transition. When you were saying that too, and you were talking about, I was thinking it takes a lot of creativity to do tax evasion. And I was thinking you're going to learn about, I mean, I think you already have learned about some criminal masterminds too that are very creative and the way they go about things. So, really, you need that creativity, can be a superpower or a weapon, I suppose. Okay, so what did lead you to apply to the MIT boot camps? I kind of know the answer to this, but what would you look back and say made you want to do that? And yeah, feel free to let us know how you feel about it now. Usually, what we ask is, were there any parts of the framework or the teachings that you found useful to you since then? And you could talk about the opposite too.
No, why would I do that? So, what drew me there is I actually went back to uni for another go. I did love business and entrepreneurship so much, and I was living it in my day to day job. But I really thought that getting credentials were important at that time. So, I enrolled in a new undergrad, which was a Bachelor of Business majoring in entrepreneurship. So, the algorithms found me somewhere through that, and I saw an invitation, MIT boot camps in Boston. It was open to anyone in the world. That kind of blew me away. I was like, holy moly, let me Google this. So I Googled MIT, and the year that we went, many moons ago in 2016, MIT was the number one university in the world. So I was like, holy crap, that's impressive. Like, I don't think anything of it. I don't think I'll get in, but I'll apply anyway and see what happens. I applied. I had amazing recognition from my manager at the time. And I got tingles, so ecstatic. And then I got the bill of like, hey, if you want to come to Boston from Australia, this is how much it's going to cost you. I was like, holy shit, this is real. This is expensive. This is a lot of money, but this is a huge opportunity. So I scraped whatever savings I had. I did crowdfunding, which was successful. And I guess it was a bit of a lesson in, hey, people are here to support you. It's very hard to ask for help sometimes. But yeah, leaning in was definitely a privilege. So my pitch to MIT was, how can we bring emotional intelligence into entrepreneurship more? How can we make sure that it's ingrained in the products that we're building and the services that we're providing and the teams that we're pulling together? And luckily, they thought that, that was important too. And so I took a big, long flight and headed over to Boston. The rest is history. Pros were that I loved the lessons that we were taught by some of the world's greatest leaders in those fields. So for us, it was like business and entrepreneurship and design and startups. What made me sad is that because the course championed not sleeping, half the room was therefore falling asleep in those sessions. And I just looked around and I thought, what a waste of frickin' time and money. Because no fault of their own, they were encouraged to not sleep. So therefore, they did sleep in the classes because they're human. Yeah, that was just a bit of a double-sided coin. I'm like, aren't we wasting the teacher's time by half of us not being present and taking this in? That was challenging. The part that I thought was the worst was that I had some really bad mentor experiences. Ones that I would 100% say were borderline abusive. And there were some other things that happened in the week to other campmates that, you know what, I'm doing criminology now and that it would just not fly. Like it's just really unacceptable. And I had just flown around the world to be there. I'd paid a lot of money to be there. So I was like, oh, maybe I do need to be abused. Cool. No, I didn't. I know that now, but that happened quite early on in the week, and that just put the sourest lolly in my mouth. I was just like, are these people for real? That shit would never fly in management or leadership in Australia in the amazing company and environment I was working in at that time. So I guess good that I had something to compare and contrast it to, but like disgusting that I had to pay to put up with that. Yeah, I'm obviously still bitter, but I'm a very emotional person, so that's not surprising. I had a super fun night when we weren't doing our MIT work, and I just like had such a great social experience. I had such a great time with Nancy and Anders and some wonderful other people that I met there, and those connections made it all worthwhile for me. So yeah, it's funny that the thing that really held it together for me was the people in the end. And the thing that made it freaking horrible was also some of the other people. So yeah, wow, it was a big experience.
Thank you so much for going into that. I know experiences that are negative, like the one that you've had, is hard to share and is often, especially in entrepreneurship, where there's such a mentality of like everything has to be positive all the time, shared but being really entrepreneurial. And so I think there's a lot of value in just being willing to share that and talk about those sorts of experiences. So thank you again. And of course, I'm very sorry you went through that. That's terrible. There's definitely a lot of good things about the boot camp, at least for me personally, but there's also like the entrepreneurship mindset can be pushed to a degree that is really detrimental to people in long term or even short term situations.
Hi there. If you're enjoying this podcast, would you mind leaving us a review, a like, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform? Thanks so much. That really helps our reach. The Founders Voyage podcast is now proudly sponsored by VidOps. Kane at VidOps has been taking care of our editing since early 2024. He works efficiently, and I'm sure you'll agree that he does a great job. Thank you to VidOps for helping bring this podcast to life. If you want the same great support we're getting for your podcast, or you need help with video, photography, or animation, you can get 10% off at vidops.io using our referral code Voyage. That's vidops.io, referral code Voyage. Now back to the show.
The biggest thing I learned from my MIT experience was back yourself in. Before that, I was so unsure. I thought, I want to be a CEO. I want to be a leader. I want to be number one. I think I can do it. Imposter, imposter, imposter. And I went over there and I was CEO of my group. And it taught me that I never, ever want to be CEO again. That is not my role. That is not my jam. It turns out I am the world's greatest vice president. I am a confidant. I am a good balance between the technical people. I am the VP. But I didn't know that before I went there. So that was a good lesson.
Thank you so much for, I guess, like just honestly sharing that too. In your answer to the last question, I was thinking, I see you as a leader. It's really nice to like hear like how you see yourself and like what's kind of like the journey that you've taken to be able to see yourself that way. I know that we're different. We definitely are. But I feel like you're like in my mind, you're like a combination of Brian and I, and that's why we get along so well. But I think I see myself as like a very reluctant leader, and like he always wants to be the leader. So I think what I've come to, and I don't know if you agree with this, is maybe it's not like if you're meant to lead or you're not meant to lead, but what you're really passionate about, because then you find your capacity to lead. Because I would argue that like you're a very good leader in many respects. You can mull that over and you can let me know later if you agree with me. I'm actually going to pass to Moeen. He has a question for you, and I just wanted to give him a chance.
So I'm from Bangladesh. I attended the boot camp in between after the COVID period online. My question is you have a journey of many different sectors from marketing to the platform. So you're balancing everything and you have gone through a lot of stuff as you have described. From your perspective, after doing the bootcamp, I have been through a lot of ventures, but some became successful and some not. Right now, I'm planning to do co-working, but the standard for co-working in the world is like you have a big floor and where people from different segments can join and work together. So do you have any suggestions for me if I open a co-working right now in this situation? This is a global recession running right now all over the world. The Ukraine-Russia war, you can see the war in like Iran and Israel. So do you have any suggestions in right now if I start a business from your perspective? Is it good or bad? We have a lot of experience on different sectors.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, it's interesting because you would say financially, yeah, it's a tough period. It's a tough time. You really got to think about your customers, number one, not you. Do people in your market and your area have the money to co-work? And is your model flexible enough to allow for, different options and levels of co-working? So financially, yeah, it's a tough game. It's a tough game. You have to provide something that people really are going to prioritize their money for. And that's, yeah, it's tough in every market. It's absolutely tough here. I mean, the other side of it is, can you create something that people don't want to miss out on in terms of a co working space? Rituals don't cost a lot of money usually, but if you can create them there in your schedule that are consistent and, yeah, comfortable and make people want to stay, even if it's just for half an hour before they go home at the end of a busy week. I think those things are really important in business, but also in creating community. A lot of things are going to start slowing down in the world. Population, we've got finite resources. One thing that needs to ramp up is community. And so if you can add that into your life and your business, then you're on a better foot than the people that aren't doing that. So I think those things are really important.
I asked this question because this is a community voice, and this is related. I think this is related to our conversation. And most of us have this kind of experience that a good community, bad community vibe, where we accepted, where we are neglected. My main goal for the co-working is not everyone can afford a commercial space for office these days. Most of us who are starting a startup or something like that, they want a small space for four people. Say they want ready-made everything. So that's why I asked. I think is it relevant or not?
I think it sounds great. Thank you and good luck.
We really like to have people come in and voice their questions. And Beck, I think that was an excellent answer. That was really good. And I think it is important, at least for me, definitely important to have those rituals that I can repeat that give you that feeling of connection or safety based on the particular one. So I think great advice. Now, we have talked about a couple of negative experiences that you've had. What I'd love to dig into is your perspective sort of in the future. What are you excited about or looking for? And are there any things either upcoming or maybe you'd like to work on that get your energy pumping?
Yeah, so I'm in my final year of my criminology master's at the moment. And this course has been challenging because I wouldn't say it's uncreative because I think you can bring creativity into everything. But yeah, it's really turned on the technical side of my brain, which I have loved because I'm really interested in data and real world statistics, which are super important in all crimes, obviously. My interest going into criminology was not crime or forensics. I actually don't like crime shows. I don't watch crime movies. I have no interest in that side of crime. I'm very interested in policy and prevention, the laws, the macro factors, the social norms that influence what's going on in our cities, communities, lives, and how that varies by country and who's doing it well and who's doing it not well. This excites me, which is, I don't know, is it worrying? Maybe. Australia has a great criminal justice system until it doesn't. And where it goes wrong, Indigenous incarceration would probably be the biggest call out. We incarcerate our Indigenous people at a rate that's 4 times higher than America. Like, what the frig are we doing? No one knows these horrible statistics. We like to bury them under the rug. And these are things that I think are important to bring up in conversations and get on the front pages of reputable newspapers, of which there is few, sadly, in this country. But this really excites me about bringing national issues to the forefront. One thing that I didn't think I would be researching because, yeah, a lot of national crime is violent crime. And I find that challenging because a lot of it is gendered crime. And I want to believe the world is a safe place. And the more you investigate and research about gendered crime, the more you realize that it's really not a safe place for a large proportion of society. So, one thing that I'm looking forward to in the future is thinking about the problem of not just how we can solve gendered violence, but the biggest changer of behaviors is not laws, sadly, when it comes to gendered violence. What stops people is social norms. So, don't accept at community, national, international, state level, what we do and don't accept in our friendship and family groups, what we do and don't accept in our workplaces. Yeah, the real marker of permanent change is changing beliefs and values. Now, I've done marketing for a long time. The hardest thing in the world to change is beliefs and values about, gender roles. Do you know the baby's gender? Let's have a gender reveal party. Like, gender is so ingrained in our culture, but we don't challenge it enough. So I'm really excited about delving into that big, scary space.
I love that. Taking into account like some of what we've talked about, I kind of feel like this is an appropriate time to ask you, how do you feel you define success for yourself? And do you feel like you define it differently in a personal sense versus professionally, or is it kind of one and the same?
I think it has evolved so much. When I first left home, it was a lot about survival and just making sure there was a roof over my head and food on the plate. To MIT, I was very much like business minded, startup minded. My success was through the value, I guess, a little bit of maybe profitization. And now I think I've almost fully come away from that, where success to me doesn't look like infinite growth feasible. It's not feasible in business. It's not feasible personally. We are not robots. Everyone has an expiry stamp. So for me, success is 100% outside of myself now. So family, home, getting better at being a better partner. I need to put that one up the list a little bit. Yeah, paying my bills, but trying to change the world at the same time and not necessarily thinking that I have to be the person leading that change. I can absolutely be the person driving, I guess, the research or the data or the facts behind someone who's a better mouthpiece. So success for me is enjoying what I do and I'm loving this research part so, so much. So that's important. But I think almost daily I have to come back and go, hey, you spent this many hours working or researching today. How many hours have you thought about being a better parent or family member? We just neglect that so often. It's just so easy to put on the back burner. and also personal growth, because being a better parent and a better partner is about that 1%. Like, am I deprioritizing my family for, other worldly things? Or is that something that I need to come back to? I am so chilled now. I don't feel stressed. I feel like I'm contributing, but I'm not killing myself to do it. I'm balanced. I just feel better. I think a lot of the ego has left the room, which is really helpful. It probably helps that I don't drink as much anymore, because I probably get 7 days a week now, whereas before I got 5 to 6. But yeah, I feel in a really good place now. I guess if you looked on paper, I'm not the most successful I've ever been, but I don't feel that way. So I think that helps.
I think that does absolutely. I think also success is something that's so personal how you define it. Like what's important for you, how you prioritize things is not something you can read about online or be taught it in a classroom. Like you have to figure that out for yourself. And I think coming to that conclusion for yourself about how you want to prioritize things is so powerful, and it puts you in a position where it's harder for other people to say what you should or shouldn't do because it's, your priorities, your success. So thank you for going through that. Now, we have a particular question we like to wrap up with. The way it's phrased is like, do you have any words of wisdom you want to share with us today? I really want you to interpret this as, makes the most sense to you. So if that's words of wisdom you saw on a TV show, or your partner told you one time, or, you heard from a grandparent, or you came up for yourself and haven't said to anyone, whatever makes the most sense to you to share with us.
Yeah, I think that one I come back to regularly. This is not my own words. Gosh, where did I read it? I have no idea. So it's not new, so you may have heard it before. But if your business closes or your house falls to the ground, what's left? You've got your family, you've got your education, and you've got your health. So if you're not prioritizing those three things in life, the other stuff doesn't matter. You can win or lose the other stuff more easily than you'd think, but you really need to prioritize your health, your education you've always got, and, your family and friends. Because if you can get those things right, then successes and failures in those other areas won't hit as hard. Really helped me see that, hey, yes, my education bill is huge, and doing this master's has put, some extra zeros on it, but that is invaluable expense. That expense no one can take away from me. No one can take away that I am a more complex and critical thinker now, and that I can think on many more different levels and be critical of my own thinking and ideas and challenge my own beliefs now, which I think, I wasn't able to do as successfully before. So, health, family, education are the backbone of any successful founder, startup, business life.
Very well articulated. I love that. I feel like that should be maybe the forward to your book that you're going to write
Nancy,
in the
I'm a
next 10
VP. I need
years.
someone to write it for me.
I actually have seen that some people have wisely had some really great co-authors. So I'm not against that, but you still have to write a book. So thank you so much for taking the time to share with us, to share your personal and professional journey and insights. We really appreciate your thoughts and everything you shared with us and taught us today. We hope that you felt like you could let your hair down and just be yourself.
It was nice. It was so good to see you both. We should do this in person one day.
Yes,
Absolutely.
that's coming.
Ooh, stay tuned.
TBD. Yes. Thank you again so much for taking this time. And thank you, Maureen, for joining us. And thank you to everyone listening and supporting Founders Voyage on their favorite podcast platforms. We hope you'll join us again next week. And Bec, if there's anyone that you feel would benefit from this experience, feel free to nominate them. We're very open to that.
Will do.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Have a great day and evening ahead.
Good afternoon, good evening, good night.
That's it. You've
You've just finished another episode of Founders Voyage, the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. The team at Founders Voyage wants to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed your time with us, and if so, please share this with someone else who might enjoy this podcast. You can also support us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and by donating to our Patreon. Outro music today is Something for Nothing by Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band.